Look, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to tell you that Ohio State does not have a home field advantage at Ohio Stadium, the Horseshoe. But I will tell you this, the advantage for one of these primetime night games at the Shoe, not quite as big as you actually think. Ohio State trying to black out the Shoe in Columbus this Saturday night against the Spartans. We're going to preview Ohio State, Michigan State. We've got Bill Bender coming up of the Sporting News. We'll talk some college football. Also, Justin Fields' Heisman chances and who Bill thinks is the biggest contender to challenge Ohio State in the Big Ten. Plus, Jim Comparoni, publisher of Spartan Mag. They are a Michigan State affiliate on the Rivals Network. He'll come in. We'll preview the Spartans from the Michigan State side. He'll tell us about the injuries to the offensive line, Brian Lewerke's development/progress, and that mean, nasty front seven of the Spartans. All coming up next on the Unscripted Ohio podcast.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove and in part by JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. For the latest news, notes, analysis, and discussion, check us out on BuckeyeGrove.com and follow us on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Now, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Ma! Can we get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Ma! The meatloaf!
This is the Unscripted Ohio podcast. That makes me your esteemed host, Kyle Lamb. Welcome back to Unscripted Ohio. Thank you for giving us a listen today. We are here thanks to BuckeyeGrove.com, as well as our title sponsor, JFQ Lending. All of your mortgage and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. Licensed in 33 states. More on the way. Please visit them at jfqlending.com. We are also supported by GoBus. Ride to over 40 stops across Ohio, connecting rural communities to Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. That's the 3 C's. Get to Ohio State games with GoBus and bring comfort back to traveling. Check them out at ridegobus.com. Ohio State, Michigan State blacking out the Shoe Saturday night. I'm not crazy about these blackouts. And some of you have messaged me saying they were pretty good in person. At least the night games were. The Penn State 2015 game. That noon game that they tried the blackout, that one did not work well at all. Personally, I don't think the blackouts look all that good on television. You just kind of, there are some clinks of red in there. Enough people don't have black jerseys and black apparel, black shirts. And so, I don't know. I just don't think it looks aesthetically pleasing enough to do. Some of you might disagree with that. I know in person it's a different experience than seeing it on TV, but when you're doing these things, you're trying to appeal to how they come across on television. So, hey, what do I know? If you guys enjoy it and you go to the game and it enhances your experience, that is all that anybody could ask for. I just personally think it's not worth it. I just don't think it looks good enough and it really makes that big of a difference. Now, you know, when Penn State does those whiteouts in Happy Valley, those are awesome looking, okay? But white shows up better on television than black does, especially a night game. It just kind of blends and it looks bland. But again, just my opinion. If you guys like it, more power to you. But I will say this, and I tease this. Look, this Ohio State-Michigan State game, let me preface my statement by saying I don't really care about past history, past seasons. Past seasons aren't going to win this game for Michigan State. They're really not. You know, that 98 team that came in 28-point underdogs to Ohio State, which the 98 team I still think is one of the best Ohio State teams at least I've seen in my lifetime. I didn't see the 74 team and some of those other, the 68 team. I didn't see some of those early Woody Hayes teams, but I did see 1998. I still think in my lifetime that is one of the best Ohio State teams. I actually think that is up there, maybe even better with 2014. We see the insane amount of talent that came from 2014 that is in the NFL now playing so well. Joey Bosa, Ezekiel Elliott, Michael Thomas. We're going to look back in history, and we're going to see that 2014 team was really, really good, really talented, which just makes 2015 all that more frustrating for Ohio State fans, right? Because you see the talent that came from that, and most of the 2014 guys were still there in 2015. It's not that they didn't lose anybody. Michael Thomas obviously was gone, but there was still an enormous amount of talent back in 2015. And it is really going to be one of the great mysteries of Ohio State football, how they struggled so much in 2015 for much of the season. That Michigan State loss, still so perplexing. How did they get held to so few points that game? I know part of it was scheme, not running Ezekiel enough. That's part of it. But nonetheless, that's still too talented an offense to be held to 14 points. They just didn't get it done that day. It's really going to be a mystery for as long as we're on this earth. And I tell you, it's not that they didn't have the ability, because look what they did to Michigan and look what they did to Notre Dame in the bowl game. You know, they showed up and showed out at the end of that season, but they waited way too long. They were just going through the motions. We're seeing Clemson go through the motions. We saw Florida State go through the motions in 2014. Maybe this is just a thing. Championship teams just don't have the motivation the next season. Sometimes. Not always. We saw Bama win 2 in a row earlier this decade, so it can happen. But going back, that 1998 team, I think the 98 team was as good, maybe even better than the 2014 team. Not necessarily as much talent, but just the balance that they had on both sides of the ball, and from run to pass and run defense to pass defense. I think I would take that 98 team right up there with 2014. But nonetheless, Michigan State went into the shoe that year, 28-point underdogs, 4 touchdown underdogs, and still managed to win. It's a mystery. That was one of the most shocking losses in Ohio State history. Really was something else. But we saw, again, the 2015 team, regardless of those losses, Michigan State seems to do it. They don't do it in East Lansing. And maybe that's just partially because of circumstances. Some of the bigger games have happened to be either in the Big Ten Championship recently or in Columbus at Ohio Stadium. But Michigan State has won 2 out of the last 3. Now, granted, the last time they played, Ohio State blew their doors off, 48-3. That was, I think Ohio State is still scoring as we speak from that game. But the 2015, and then you go back to 2011, those are the last two times these two teams played, Michigan State actually won. Now, the 2011 team, yeah, that was a transition. Remember, that was Luke Fickell's interim season, in between Jim Tressel being fired and Urban Meyer taking over. But Ohio State has won 5 out of the last 8, which is decent. That's not bad. I'm not saying that is a problem. But when you look at what they've done in East Lansing, they have won 7 in a row and won 9 out of 10 in the same time frame. That's going back 25 years. So Ohio State has actually played better in East Lansing. Now, that could be a little bit of a statistical anomaly, but what is actually not an anomaly is, believe it or not, these games in Columbus, the primetime night games, they don't really make that much of a difference as far as win expectancy. If you talk to any sharp or any Vegas insider type, a handicapper, somebody that keeps track of the numbers, believe it or not, these night games, the big games, they're only worth an extra half point to maybe a point. So if Ohio State would be favored by, let's say, 2 touchdowns on a neutral field over an opponent, let's say 14 points, you might give 3.5 points for home field advantage for playing in Columbus. So then you bring it up to 17.5. But because it's a night game at the shoe, believe it or not, it's not changing much. You're only bringing it up an extra half point, maybe 1 point. So it's becoming from 14 to 17.5 for home field, maybe a half point, maybe 1 point for a primetime game. So I'm not saying that this doesn't matter at all. I'm just saying that some people, I think, get a false sense of confidence because it's a night game. There's this aura of invincibility for some reason when the crowd is going to be so jazzed up. I think you want to believe that you can make an impact, and I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying it's not as much of one as you probably think. And I think there is a false sense of security with Ohio State fans right now. And I'm not saying because Michigan State won in 2015 or 1998 that they're going to come in and win this week. History is not going to help the Spartans block Ohio State's defensive line and Chase Young specifically. That is not going to help Brian Lewerke complete passes against this Buckeye secondary. That's not going to help them shut down a really strong Ohio State run game. And it's not going to help them keep from Justin Fields scrambling and making plays with his feet or completing balls to Chris Olave or Ben Victor. It's history has its place. It's a good reminder not to get too big-headed. Keep a level head here. Keep a medium sense of confidence. Because this Ohio State team is really good. I've talked about it all week. I've been talking about it all season. You should feel really excited about where the Buckeyes are. Whatever happened in the past is not going to win the game for the Spartans, but it is just a good reminder that it just takes one off night. And I think that being in Columbus doesn't make much of a big difference as opposed to playing this in East Lansing. It's still the same team, and Ohio State is still going to have the same kind of challenge. Now, all of that being said, all the caveats and the qualifiers and the hold your horses that I've just done, when I look at this game, I'm predicting an Ohio State win, as you probably are. I think Ohio State wins this 31-13. I do think Michigan State's defense is really good enough that it can keep the Ohio State run game under control. I don't think it's going to stop it, but I think it'll slow it down. If they can hold them to 4 points or 4 yards a carry, then I think that they can also keep Ohio State's offense in check to make this a 3 or 4 quarter game. Where I think Michigan State's problem is, barring something drastic or something unforeseen, I don't know how they're going to score a lot of points in this game. I'm not down on Brian Lewerke. I think he's a little bit better than he's given credit for. He's had a lot of mitigating factors the last 2 years. His own injuries, decimating injuries to the wide receiving core last year. An offensive line we'll talk about with Jim Comparoni here in a few minutes that has really failed them with injuries so far this year. He's had a lot to deal with, and I don't think that offense is very good, but I don't think it's all his fault. Their backup running back just transferred out. So now they're down to really one dependable running back in the rotation, Elijah Collins. But all those things combined, it's just not a very good offense. I don't see how Michigan State is going to score points. I see this game kind of going in a 31-13 type of game. I think it might be, maybe 20-10 at halftime, 17-10, that type of thing, and I think Ohio State slowly pulls away. I don't think it's going to be one of these jaw-dropping, amazing performances that we've seen out of Ohio State in the first 5 games. I think it'll be a little bit closer, a little bit more of a challenge, but I do think Ohio State will win. So I'm not trying to scare you with the history stuff because I actually don't think that's going to make a lick of a difference once they kick off on Saturday night. But I will just remind you that other Michigan State teams that weren't as good as Ohio State on paper did go into the shoe and win. Now, 2015, again, Michigan State won the Big Ten that year. They made it to the playoff. So I don't think that was as much of a fluke as certainly the 98 game, and I don't think it'd be as much of a fluke as Michigan State coming in this year and winning, because we're talking about right now as I record this Thursday night, a 20-point spread. I think that game in 15 was a 10-point spread, 9 or 10, something along those lines. I didn't check that. I probably should have. But anyway, I do think Ohio State's going to win. And, let's kick it off on Saturday. I don't think it's as big of an advantage as a lot of people believe. And this is not just Ohio State fans. I think there is this confidence that opposing fans have as well, all across the country, that you think there's a big crowd, an excited crowd. It's a nighttime game. There's going to be more energy, that therefore it's going to have a huge impact on the game. It can. Sometimes it does. Just not as big of one as you probably think. But Ohio State, I think, will get it done 31-13. We're back now to talk some college football with Sporting News. Bill Bender, always always insightful, never dull, coming to you from his college football bunker on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. Bill, how we doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Kyle. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. So I want to ask you real quick before we get into some college football stuff. So your own little family had some trick plays going on. You posted a video a few weeks ago. I'm curious where we've gotten, and have we got to midseason form within the Bender household yet? Has the offense developed?
Nah, I bore guys on the Buckeye beat with these stories, but I'm coaching my son's flag football team. We're a bunch of third graders playing third and fourth graders. I took a bunch of third graders. They're playing great. But we do mix in some trick plays. I hope the coach isn't listening. We play Sunday, but we're going to throw a triple reverse at them right off the go, and we'll see what happens. But we like throwing the trick plays in there.
Bill Bender, Statue of Liberty in a cloud of dust.
We do run the football a lot, and that's kind of gets into. I don't know if we have it up at SN yet, but I did a preview on Michigan State, Ohio State, and I think if Michigan State wants to keep that close this week, and I talked to Mark D'Antonio about it, he knows they're going to have to stop the run. They did that in 15. They didn't do it last time, and I was kind of, you should know better, but that was the first thing he brought up when talking about Ohio State was Dobbins in the running game and how dominant that's been.
Yeah, Bill, it's interesting you mentioned that because I posted this. You may have seen this on my Twitter timeline last night. I posted the same thing. I said, I think the key for Michigan State, if they want to win this game, is going to be keeping Ohio State to probably roughly under 4 yards a carry, and they've done it the last four opponents. All four of the last their opponents have been between 2.5 and 3, just a hair over 3 yards per carry. The Tulsa game was obviously a fluky outlier where they allowed minus 2.9 yards a carry, and that's just probably not replicable. But yeah, they have been doing a really good job of stopping the run, and Ohio State obviously averaging almost 7 yards a carry as a team. So I really do agree with you. I think that's a big key if Michigan State wants to pull off the upset Saturday night.
And certainly he talked about the offense too and being opportunistic. And you go back to that game in 15, and they are the last team from the Big Ten to go into Ohio State and win. And I remember covering that game and just kind of looking down at my computer at one point, and I was typing or whatever, and looked up the scoreboard. And I was like, man, there's 4 minutes left in this game. What's going on? And it was at that point that I realized Michigan State was going to win. Now, of course, last time they played, it probably took about 10 minutes to write your story because that game was over pretty quickly.
It's interesting watching this Michigan State offense because they have really been struggling throughout the year, and people are looking at the last couple games. They've scored 30 and 40 points, respectively, against Northwestern Indiana. But the interesting thing is the yards per play and their total offense numbers really haven't improved that much. They're just milking. They've been able to milk the points, and maximize the output. It'll be interesting to see what they do against this Ohio State defense because this is obviously a stiffer competition for them. So I am interested to see if the Spartan offense has improved, and if so, how much.
I feel like this is the inverse of Nebraska, where I thought Nebraska had a pretty good offense and a bad defense. I think Michigan State has a bad offense and a really good defense. So it's kind of like, how does Ohio State's offense react to this game? And how does, their defense, can their defense dominate this game? Certainly, because I think that Michigan State's receivers are going to be challenged in coverage. I think Lewerke's going to be challenged with Chase Young coming off the edge against, I believe it's a third string tackle. Good luck with that, I guess. But I think this is more of a challenge for Ohio State's offense. And Michigan State did successfully muddy up the game last year. I mean, Drew Chrisman was the real hero in that one, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was that was aesthetically not a very good game to watch, but very low scoring, very physical, and at one point I think it was it the third quarter of that game before we actually saw an offensive touchdown? Am I remember that correctly?
I think, yeah, and it was set up by a Chrisman punt and a turnover, and being at Ohio State, I think this is the advantage for them and gets them to the midway point where they can start thinking about the second half of the season, where there are, I don't think Northwestern shouldn't be a problem, but I think there are 3 legitimate tests on the back end of the schedule that they can build up toward.
Bill, I saw the other day the updated Heisman odds. Justin Fields had worked his way up to 3rd behind Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts. He's not getting a lot of chatter about the Heisman yet, but quietly he's just putting up the numbers. Ohio State obviously keeps winning, and that helps. Do you see him as a legitimate contender for that award right now?
I would probably vote Jalen Hurts number 1, followed by Tua, followed by Fields, then Burrow, and then Hubbard for Oklahoma State. I mean, he almost has 1,000 yards already. So I think Justin Fields is right there in that mix. And the hard part to decipher is going to be what could put Fields over the top is if he does blow up Michigan State, and he does blow up Wisconsin, and he does blow up Michigan and Penn State, because all of those defenses, I mean, Michigan's probably the worst defense of those 4 right now, and the Wolverines are still pretty good on that side of the ball.
So, Bill, I want to ask you something that Joel Klatt tweeted about in reference to the preseason rankings. The rankings have been around for years. The preseason rankings have been around, I think, 30 years maybe when they started coming out. Maybe it's been longer than that. So this is not something new, but in this day and age of college football, when indirectly these rankings can kind of, creep into the minds of the college football playoff committee when they start the process later in the year. Should we look at holding off on preseason rankings, or do you think that maybe we're making too big of a deal about that?
I think the thing is, I've done a lot of hits this week, Kyle, and everybody seems to have a different top 4. So and some of it's based on Auburn probably has the best wins, and to me, if my top 4 right now would probably be Alabama 1, Ohio State 2, Clemson 3, because I think they're better than. But I still think they're better than people were giving them credit for, even though what happened last week. And then I'd probably go LSU 4. So, some people might put Oklahoma in there, some people might put Georgia or Auburn, and that's fine, because those 7 teams, and I think Auburn has pushed in to make it 7. Are probably the best bets. I guess if you want to put Wisconsin as an 8, that's fine. I'll believe it when I see it.
I'm going to ask you this, and this is probably the most irrelevant, moot question that I will ever ask you on this show. If Clemson does somehow lose a game between here and the rest of the season, given how they've started the season and that ACC schedule just being so bad right now, is there a chance of Clemson still getting in with 1 loss, or should they get in with 1 loss in that scenario?
I think there's a good chance to be left out because the schedule. 2, those 7 teams I just mentioned. We always talk about how, and you and I have talked about this before, how my 2 rules for making the playoff, or if you're a Power 5 school. 1, go undefeated, you're in. Any Power 5 school that goes undefeated, you're in. 2, don't lose twice, or you're out, because no 2-loss team has made it in. So to me, the question becomes, if we have the 1-loss pile up, which we've had the 1-loss debate the last couple of years, I think Clemson would be on the outside looking in. Let's say it was between them and Oklahoma piles up wins against Texas and maybe beats Texas again, and Oklahoma State and those teams. I think they'd give it to Oklahoma. I know the Big Ten team and I know what you're getting at a little bit. If it was Ohio State and Clemson, and Ohio State somehow lost, Ohio State would have the better schedule by far than Clemson with all the ranked teams they're going to play in the Big Ten.
And we're probably, and that kind of leads us to the other portion of this. The SEC is going to be really interesting to watch, because there are probably 4 contenders right now. I know you were big on Auburn coming into the season, and they're kind of proving you right as to why you were high on them. I'm interested to see how this SEC West plays out, really, because right now LSU has a lot of the momentum, or has a lot of the talk of college football, but Auburn now is sneaking up on people with a couple of impressive wins. And what's interesting to me, Bill, is when I look at just purely matchups, like Auburn, I think, is better cut out to beat Alabama than LSU. LSU, I think, a lot of people are impressed because they have this passing game now, which they didn't have in the past, but the run game is only averaging 4 yards a carry, which is really incredible at this point in the season, given some of the bad teams, the bad defenses they've played. And Auburn can run the ball, and that's where Alabama has been kind of vulnerable so far.
I think you're on to something there because LSU is kind of playing the same way as Alabama. And if they're going to do that, it will probably be a very entertaining game, but it's an entertaining game that Alabama will end up winning because they have better receivers and they have a little bit better running game, and they're at home. At the Plains, with Auburn's run defense, with the steadily improving Bo Nix, with what they've got in the running game, yeah, I mean, the Iron Bowl is going to be a lot of fun this year. So I think it starts with Auburn this week beating Florida, though. Auburn plays 4 top 10 teams in the next 8 weeks. And I don't know that they can beat them all, but if they somehow find a way against Florida and LSU, they get to November and Jordan Hare with all those home games, they may just be that chaos team we're all looking for.
That could actually be kind of the worst case scenario for the SEC because Auburn is good enough to beat any one of them. They may not be good enough offensively to beat all of them, but not beating all of them means that they, like you said, they could be the chaos team that actually ruins the SEC chance of getting 2 or I know some people have mentioned 3 teams. I don't see that happening, but getting 2 teams into the college football playoff, Auburn could be the spoiler there.
Yeah, and I think they will be. It's just I've been telling people all along, and I totally agree with you there, that they're not going to beat all 4. Though I think they'll beat at least 1. I could see them beating 2. 3 is a stretch. But, again, they play at home. And that's one of those places where home field advantage at Jordan Hare is legit, especially when they're good. And they've proven that 2 years ago that they can beat Georgia and Alabama at home. So I think it's about getting there and continuing to grow around Bo Nix. And I do think they're going to win down at the Swamp this weekend. I don't think it's going to be pretty, because both teams are pretty good against the run. But, man, if you're Bo Nix and you've scored wins at Texas A&M and Florida to start your career, that's not too bad.
So, Bill, last question. So you kind of – I think I got a pretty good hint from the way you were talking earlier. Are you higher on Penn State or Wisconsin as a possible spoiler in the Big Ten race?
I think Penn State's the second best team in the Big Ten right now. I mean, that can change. I mean, Wisconsin – they've got all the pieces. Just the point I keep making, and Ohio State fans would buy this, is the last time I saw Wisconsin beat Ohio State was when they had J.J. Watt. When they beat Terrell Pryor, they needed a kickoff. They needed to run back the opening kickoff. It was in Madison. I don't know. I'd have to look this up because I feel bad now. I think the last time they won in Columbus was with Ron Dane. I could be wrong. I'm going to feel bad if I'm wrong about that, but and I'm going to look it up as soon as I get off the phone. But it takes that kind of effort to win in Columbus. Whereas Penn State, I've seen them compete with Ohio State the last 2 years. I've watched them push Ohio State to the limit, and it took fourth-quarter comebacks for Ohio State to win. I think their defense is fast. I think Sean Clifford has played ahead of expectations. The one thing they don't have that they had the last 2 years, though, that would concern me as far as playing Ohio State, they don't have Saquon Barkley. They don't have Miles Sanders. They don't have that running back that can take it to the house every time that Ohio State had to account for the last 2 years.
Yeah, Bill, I think for me, I like them a little more because their defense, both defenses are really, really good. Wisconsin's defense may be the most sound defense in the country right now, but they're not as athletic on the defensive side, and Penn State has a few more playmakers on the offensive side and a little more balance. The Wisconsin pass game looked great the first couple of weeks, but then against Northwestern, they really struggled quite a bit. So I think for me that gives Penn State the edge. So I kind of agree with you there.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't rule out Michigan as far as challenges. I mean, if Michigan beats Iowa, and if they somehow survive October, it's going to be easy. But if they go win the whiteout and then they beat Notre Dame, we're going to get into November and the hype machine will be around Harbaugh again. But those are the games he has to win, So I do think they're going to beat Iowa tomorrow or Saturday, and I think it's going to be tight. But, yeah, it's a big game for them, too. It's a big game. It's a big weekend for Michigan and Michigan State, knowing that, and I looked this up for our primer, the last time both teams had 2 losses less than 6 games into the season was 2012. And that year, Michigan State finished 7-6 and Michigan finished 8-5.
Well, if Michigan, I mean, I could see Michigan finishing 8-5 only because of their schedule. I like you think they'll play a little bit better football down the stretch, but they do have some brutal games coming up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think they've got 5 games on their schedule they could lose.
Yeah.
But I think if you do the math on it and you go 3-2 or 2-3, that's probably what they'll end up. Unless something drastic happens either way.
He is Bill Bender. You can catch him on the Sporting News. Catch him on Twitter at BillBender92. Bill, I appreciate it. We'll catch up with you later in the season.
Hey, thanks so much, Kyle. Appreciate it.
Thanks as always.
Stretch runtime here at Unscripted Ohio. Kick up your feet as we cross the finish line with the Buckeye Beat, the latest in Ohio State news and notes.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
We're here now with Jim Comparoni. He is the publisher of Spartan Mag, an affiliate of Rivals Network covering Michigan State. Jim, I appreciate you taking the time here to preview this game on Saturday.
That sounds good. Great. It's great to be on.
So let me ask you this first. So what's the temperature up there in East Lansing coming into this game? I know Michigan State was hoping to be undefeated, probably at this time of the year, and the Arizona State game kind of got away from them. So, where is the fan base, and maybe what's the temperature of the team itself?
Yeah, I think they feel like they definitely let one get away with Arizona State. I think Michigan State was the more mistake-prone team that day. And Arizona State came in, and although they were outgained about 400 to 190, Arizona State made fewer mistakes. They were able to hang in the game and benefit from a lot of favorable penalty flags. And Michigan State missed 3 field goals in a low-scoring game in which each team only had the ball 10 times. So if you're frittering away 30% of your possessions on missed field goals in a low-scoring game, you leave a team in it. Michigan State played good defense all day until the last minute and 30 seconds. They gave up a bust on a 4th and 13 scramble, and then they lost containment on a 3rd and 5 in the red zone to get it down to the 1-yard line. Then they went ahead and scored the go-ahead touchdown. The 4th and 13 scramble was talked about up here in East Lansing for almost the entire following week. How can you drop 8 people into coverage and not have an eye on the quarterback? After the game, D'Antonio said that there was a spy, but if you go back and look at it, I'm not sure who the spy was supposed to be. Basically, when you talk to the players in the days that followed, they felt like it was combined error on 2 or 3 players dropping too deep into pass coverage, too far, sinking too far, and people trying to overhelp a little bit, which is uncharacteristic. Michigan State on defense blocks well, or gets off blocks well, tackles well, plays their assignments well, and they did all that day until when it mattered most, and it cost them a victory. Arizona State's pretty good, winning at California last week. They beat a couple of top 25 teams. Arizona State, if you don't beat them, they might be the last team standing and then beat you on a given Saturday. Michigan State righted a good portion of that with a good performance at Northwestern the following week, so that had people feeling better about the team and so forth, and then came out and had an uneven performance last week against Indiana, and now there's questions again as to exactly what this team is and what they're capable of doing. 4-1 looks okay right now in the record books, number 25 in the country, but they should have been 5-0 and maybe an inflated 5-0 and in the top 15. And still, we wouldn't know a whole lot about the team other than the fact that the offense is better, but it's still not a team that can overcome a lot of mistakes, and it's still a team that will make mistakes. I know this is a long answer, but case in point, last week, that game was getting tight. Michigan State had a 3rd down and 3, and they had an illegal motion penalty, wide receiver and a flanker going in motion at the same time. I mean, this is like middle school preseason error on 3rd and 3 in a tight game in game 5. Things like that need to get solved, and things like that are things that did not happen to this program when they were winning games and competing for championships just a few years ago. So that stuff needs to get ironed out.
Jim, you mentioned a lot we don't know about Michigan State yet. I think one thing we do know is that defensive front 7 is mean and nasty as it has been so often in the past. And I think fans of Smash Mouth football are going to like the matchup between the Ohio State run game, which has been beating people up at the line of scrimmage so far this year, and a Michigan State run defense that has been consistently giving up only 2.5, 3 yards a carry. I think it'll really be interesting from both sides to see that battle up front when Ohio State has the ball.
Ohio State, from what I can see, is running. They've always run the inside zone a lot, but it seems like they're leaning on it even more. It's almost like more of a muscular approach in some ways. You can disagree with me on that if I'm wrong, but they'll bust it inside. They tested Nebraska inside over and over, and Nebraska eventually gave up. They lost containment on bounce outs to the outside from what I could tell a few times, and then Nebraska got behind 17-0, 24-0, and then you start to see a little bit of hero ball attempts by Nebraska, and in my opinion, guys getting out of their gaps and not playing their assignment, and then the whole boat sank. Michigan State's defensive front is good. They stopped the run last year, number one in the country in that category. They've been good for the most part this year. Northwestern ran the ball a little bit in the fourth quarter. Arizona State was stopped, but got just enough with a good tailback in Eno Benjamin that the run game, they didn't quite totally have to abandon it. Plus, the game was close, so they didn't really have to go to the air a lot. And they just kind of eked it out and ran clock and won at the end. But down in and down out, Michigan State's got a good rush defense, and this is going to be a great matchup, Big Ten-style matchup, Michigan State's rush defense, Ohio State's rush offense. It starts Michigan State, a good tag team of seniors at defensive tackle, Raekwon Williams and Mike Panashuk. They're good, and you know what? They were good back in 2016 when they came on as starters at the end of Michigan State's 3-9 season in 2016. At that point, Michigan State was getting rid of some bad seeds in the program, and these two, Panashuk and Williams, were coming on as freshmen, and they played a lot that day, and they did a pretty good job of keeping Ohio State's rush defense quiet that day, which allowed Michigan State to make a run at a monumental upset. They did not get the upset that day, but those guys are still around, Williams and Panashuk. Williams could have went to the NFL last year, stuck around. He's good. Kenny Willekes had a big day against Ohio State last year. Plays the run well, good pass rusher, good all-around defensive end. Those three are good. And then Mike Panashuk's brother, Jacob Panashuk, defensive end, is coming along. Sometimes teams attack him with the zone read option to his side. He's been seeing that a lot. He needs to improve on that. There are weaknesses in the defense. That's one that needs to get tightened up. But overall, I think if Michigan State wants to have a chance to stay competitive, they need their so-called terrific rush defense to play up to that reputation and contain or stop the run in order to have a chance to survive the rest of the elements that are out there.
Coming into this game, a lot of the biggest question marks are going to be surrounding the Michigan State offense and how much production they can get against an improved Ohio State defense. I want to start with the offensive line because there have been so many injuries up front for Michigan State, and I think exacerbating it is they're down to the third-string tackle, and Mark D'Antonio obviously spoke so highly of trying to contain Chase Young, and that's going to be a difficult ask this week. Where is Michigan State on that left side with the tackle situation and some of the other injuries that they have even in the middle?
It's a problem, and they're actually at their fourth left tackle. The first one is Cole Chulins, who has not played at all this year. He's got a back injury. Then A.J. Arcuri was listed as the starter heading into the season opener. He was injured before week number 1, did not play, and then he played in week 2 at the very end in mop-up duty against Western Michigan, and he tweaked that injury again in mop-up duty, so he's not been back. So Kevin Jarvis, a junior who's started for 3 years at guard, moved out to left tackle, struggled the first couple of games at his left tackle, was doing better against, I think it was the Arizona State game, and he went down. So then Tyler Higbee, who has been a spot starter throughout his career, he started at center, started at guard, started at tackle. And it really kind of flatlined as a player, been a little bit of a disappointment. I mean, he's given his best, but just never quite got to the next level as a player. Lost his starting job last year, came into this season as a senior second-string guard. And then they moved him to left tackle as an emergency, and he's done okay. Gave up 3 negative plays against Northwestern. It's strange because it's like all or nothing. He'll give up a negative play, and then he'll have 10 real good, solid, functional plays in a row. They like solid and functional. That's what they're asking out of him. But now he's going up, moving way up in weight class to take on Young and number 18, when he has to see him, and he'll need some help because I don't think there's anybody in the Big Ten that can block Young down in and down out. Chase Young, as you guys know, he's playing in the NFL this Sunday. He's a pro right now. And Tyler Higbee is a fourth string left tackle who's a spot starter who's done a pretty good job. In an emergency, the Michigan State coaches are darn happy they have him, Tyler Higbee, and this is going to be a really difficult test. Higbee and the right tackle Jordan Reed are both somewhat iffy for Michigan State. They were okay against Gaziano of Northwestern, who's a really good one. This one will be different this weekend. Michigan State has to figure out how they can function while they've got probably a hole in the boat over there at left tackle on at least a handful of downs in this game.
You know, Brian Lewerke has been such a lightning rod, and you have to feel for him a little bit because last year it was all the injuries to the receivers and some of the skill positions, and this year it's all those injuries up front trying to protect him. But one thing where he has done better is last year I think he threw an interception in all but one game all year, which was crazy. But this year he has limited those mistakes, only one interception so far. You know, his completion percentage is not probably where where Michigan State would like it to be, but he clearly has improved it and not made those big mistakes from what I've seen, Jim.
Yeah, and coming into the season, you read a lot of the preseason annuals, and you hear people talking on the talk shows in August. They talk about how Brian Lewerke is the mediocre, it's a bad quarterback. I'm like, are you people stupid? Were they not aware that he was injured all of last year? And the way he tried to throw the ball against Michigan in some of these other games when he was like 7 out of 25, he was out there with a bad arm. And he said afterwards, after the season, he probably should have shut it down after week 6 against Penn State. He probably should have just stopped and not played the second half of the season. So he goes out there and he plays, gives his best, plays hurt, can't throw, and helps the team get to a 7-5 record. And the next year, everybody's criticizing him. Well, those people weren't paying attention. Nothing I hate worse than the people with opinions who aren't paying attention. It's ridiculous. So Lewerke was excellent as a sophomore. So last year struggled, was hurt. Okay, so this year comes back and he's playing better. He's not great, but he's making good throws to pull out that victory against Indiana. The 2-minute offense has been good at the end of the first half against Northwestern, at the end of the game against Arizona State, at the end of both halves last week. Beat that. He's done well. The accuracy, they've had some drop passes. His accuracy, there were 3 or 4 passes last week that he missed that you cannot afford to have happen to you. Otherwise, you could be down 14, 21, 20 in a hurry this weekend. So the accuracy, which was good when he's a sophomore, needs to get tuned back in. Last year, he didn't use his legs as much. Then he was hurt midway through the year. This year, he's using his legs a little bit more, especially in key situations. Michigan State's using more. They're using no huddle, sometimes tempo, pistol, some RPOs. He's new with the RPOs. They had it sprinkled in a little bit last year. They're trying to do more of it this year. And you're seeing that with quarterbacks around the country. Making reads of coverages for throws is one thing. Making reads on unblocked edge linemen as to whether to hand it off or keep it or throw is a different type of read. And that's new for Brian Lewerke, and he's been hot and cold with those so far this year. So he's got talent, he's got experience, but it's interesting because there's still a level of improvement that he's chasing at this late stage in his career. But he has the capacity of playing good quarterback.
Last question I want to ask you, Jim. So, a lot of coaches have different strategies on motivation and whether or not to use past successes going into a big game like this. Where does Mark Antonio and Michigan State stand? Do you think that they're going to use the 2015 upset, maybe even going back all the way 1998, the upset of Ohio State? Do you think that they're big on that motivation for a game like this?
Yeah, they need those things to get their kids to believe that that they can repeat history and they've got a chance. And I think that serves Michigan State well in this rivalry once in a while. Ohio State's got great talent and they've got an aura, they've got a mystique. I don't think the aura and mystique registers as much when they play Michigan State. They play Michigan State every year. Michigan State, as everyone knows, is loaded with Ohio kids that are eager to play against Ohio State. And there's always recent history of Michigan State doing some impressive, unexpected things against Ohio State. the familiarity there, even the coaching staff. I think that leads to it also. So that's worth a little bit for Michigan State it didn't help them 2 years ago when they were blown out 48-3. I think all that went out the window the week before when Ohio State laid an egg against Iowa. So Michigan State got the full Mike Tyson version of Ohio State the next week. So if you can catch Ohio State napping a little bit, they might not respect Michigan State as much as they need to some years, because it's not a rivalry, but there's a familiarity. It's kind of like when you're going against your cousin or something. It's like, oh yeah, that's just my cousin Ohio State. We can play with them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I don't know if that makes sense or not, but D'Antonio was talking this week about how they need to play a perfect game. That's true. And everyone on that roster is going to be committed to trying to attain that level of play. I don't know if they will get there. But one thing to have all the Ohio kids on the players on the team that are so motivated for this game, but that rubs off on other teammates that are not from Ohio, whether they want to help those Ohio kids win, or it just all of a sudden they just sense in all the film rooms, oh, this is a different level this week. And you can see it during pregame warm-up. Look at the Michigan State half of the field and check out the kids from Ohio during pregame. You'll see that they're a little more fired up than you normally see in a pregame from other opponents. It'd be interesting to see if you would agree with that or not, but I've noticed it. I haven't looked for it in the past, but I've noticed it. I was like, oh man, that guy's really fired up. He's getting people fired up around him. So all of those little things can add up to giving you a chance to make a run at an upset if other things fall in line also.
Well, if history is a guide, this should be another huge battle between Michigan State and Ohio State. There have been many physical games in the past. It seems like I would say 9 out of every 10 meetings are really, really one of the most physical games of the year. So it should be a lot of fun. Saturday night, 7:30 in the shoe. Ohio State hoping to black out Michigan State wearing their black alternate jerseys. Jim, I appreciate you taking the time, and we will catch you again here in the near future.
Great. Sounds great. Thanks a lot.
That will wrap it up for the Unscripted Ohio podcast for today. Thanks to Bill Bender and Jim Comparoni for joining me and previewing this Michigan State game in college football. Please catch me on Twitter at KYLAM8. Please catch the show on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. You can catch the show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as well as Scarlet and Gray podcast every Tuesday and Thursday. All of our podcasts on Unscripted Ohio on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or iHeartRadio. That's going to do it for me. Hope everybody has a great weekend. We'll catch you Monday.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.